Good morning. I know many of you, as you gather here, we're so glad that you're here, and we have obviously spent a bit of time trying to explain the transition into the new app, and it's like, this is like more important than you can know as to how we take incredibly seriously our responsibility to steward people coming in and out of our church. And so the more effective we are at understanding and being able to really be available as well as understand what's happening in our church and our congregation, it just makes, it just helps us to steward that much better. So I just want to make sure you realize this is not just a, kind of like idea to go, hey, let's talk about our app. But it's like, this is really important for what we are working to do together as a church, and just really grateful for Carson and Clay and all the ones who've been, working so hard to make this transition work. And obviously your cooperation is needed, and I'm not going to say anything more about that, but it is important. Today we're continuing our series on faithfulness, and we're going to be in the book of Galatians, looking at a passage that most of us, if you've grown up in the church, are familiar with. And if you've been around Port City any length of time, I'm going to try to look at this from just a little bit different angle. So I'm going to look at it kind of from underneath and see if we can look up at it and see something different. This is in Galatians chapter 5, starting at around verse 16 and through. And this is the famous fruit of the Spirit passage. And so I want to look there. And as we begin, I want to ask you a question. And the question is, have you ever struggled with a sin pattern? Yes or no? No, I'm just kidding. There's more to the question. I was just seeing where we go. Have you ever struggled with a sin pattern or some habit that just undermines the things that you really want? Undermines maybe the relationships that you have. Maybe it's temper. Maybe it's the way you see other people. Maybe it's contempt. Maybe it's lust. Maybe there's just patterns that you're stuck in, some kind of addictive behavior. And you wonder, when will this be behind me? You ever felt like that? When is this not going to be the condition of my life anymore? And the way I want us to think about this question is, what if it's not a function of time when that occurs? It's not when, but it's a different question. Because this is what I think what faithfulness is about. Faithfulness is a condition by which we have been faithful, and it only occurs to us when you look back over your life. Right? There's to be faithful in the moment, but it's after time, month after month, year after year, that you look back and say, oh, I have been faithful. So faithfulness is kind of a condition of something that happens in time, and it's only revealed over time. So this is how I want to think about this. And when I was trying to wrestle with how to set it in this, I'm trying to think of how to give us an illustration. So this is an illustration. It's a bad illustration, but it'll serve nonetheless, because faithfulness has to have a source. And this is how we began this series, right? Paul said, are you so foolish that thinking that you have begun this way of life by the Spirit, that you're now going to be able to complete it or live it out in the flesh? That was the question at the beginning of this series. A few years ago, we went out, I was with some friends, and they were scuba diving, and I was not yet certified to scuba dive. So I was going to free dive. We went out to the Liberty ship, which is a few miles offshore, off the coast, and we were going to be diving around the ship, and they all got their scuba gear on. In the water they go. And so I'm like, I'm going to do the same thing. So I got my mask on, my fins on, and what I was trying to do is to see how deep I could go. And could I get down, and you think you're going like 25, 35 feet. You're like 7 feet underwater, and your ears are popping. You're like, oh my gosh, what's happening to me? And you know what the only thing you can think of when you get down that far? Can I get back to the surface? You come back up and you go, okay, I made it. And you hold your breath again and you go back down, and I could see like the top of the Liberty ship. So I'm swimming. And the more you swim, the more you're trying to see, the more you start to panic, because you're going, the deeper I go, right? That's the further I go back to the surface. And so the whole time you're just focused on, can I stay alive? While the rest of them are underneath the water, what they're seeing and what they're experiencing is so different from what I'm experiencing. And do you know what the difference is? It's presence. There is something that is with them that gives them a source for which they can sustain the freedom that they are experiencing. Me, on the other hand, I got to hold my breath. And a lot of us, we live this life holding our breath. You come to church, take a deep breath. And you just fight the whole week until you can get back to the surface to get another one, and you're missing the source. This is what Paul is talking about. And so when we think about this idea of faithfulness, where does your faithfulness come from? Most of us just think we can just grin and bear it. We just have developed some kind of discipline or some kind of strength of character, and then we'll be faithful. And that's not really how this is designed to work. We also often think that our faithfulness happens because we simply try harder. But our faithfulness, your faithfulness and my faithfulness has to rest or be sourced from somewhere. When we think of this, and I want to go ahead and set this up in this way. When John tries to describe God, he says, "Beloved, let us love one another. For love is from God, and everyone who loves is born of God. But whoever does not love does not know God." Do you know why? Because God is love. And you got to wrestle with what you think or believe about that. That is how the scripture, and I'm going to show you over the next couple weeks the best I can to show you how thorough this is and what Jesus expects of us. And God has not changed. His desire, his pursuit of us, his calling on human beings and our vocation has not changed from the very beginning. He has always intended us to live in a relationship with him as his people and he as our God. And he has intended us to bear fruit of this relationship. Right? The call in the garden to be fruitful and multiply isn't just to have kids. It's to allow our lives to produce something into the world. This kind of life doesn't happen because you promise to do better, because you learn how to stay connected, to remain, to have that source present with you all of the time. So when I'm trying to think about this idea of God's faithfulness and faithfulness in general, the word that I try to write in my journal and that I try to use to describe it is fidelity. Fidelity. Fidelity means faithfulness, but it's not primarily behavioral, and it's not merely the absence of unfaithfulness. I've talked to couples before, and they're like, man, all these women are after me, and I was faithful. I'm like, no, you weren't. Like, because you weren't unfaithful doesn't mean you're faithful. We have this idea that we just stop doing. Faithfulness is a fidelity. It is sealed in a covenant, in a relationship by a promise. That's why this matters, how we think about it. It's not just you not doing things. It's you and I learning how to derive from him, his character, his essence, that faithfulness, your faithfulness and mine, is not primarily a function of effort, but it is an expression of God's image. So we've got to get this vision in our heads. The idea of fidelity is a place where there's a reliability within a relationship that allows presence and connectedness and safety and freedom. That happens within a promised relationship, within a covenant. And we learn the reality of what God has done. So we talked about last week that we have been right with God, that we have been reconciled to him, and we are returned to the fidelity of God himself, that his Spirit is a guarantee of his promise. That's how the scriptures reveal this to us. That God's Spirit is his presence, and therein is the possibility for us to abide, and therein is our sense of safety and connectivity and freedom and presence. And so we learn to experience his faithfulness, and therein we have hope for our own faithfulness. And this is where I want for us to go today. So a lot of us, we start thinking, when will this thing be behind me? That's how we always approach change, almost always. And what you end up thinking is that your faithfulness or your capacity as a Christian or a follower is measured by ease. You think that if I were more faithful, this would be easier. Have you ever thought that before? I remember being a pastor and struggling with things like, how can I still struggle with this? This should be easier by now. So one of my exercises over the last few month or so has been to read the Sermon on the Mount. So I'm reading it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. I'm doing it to reorient myself to what Jesus, it's his most profound teaching. The early church used this as the central reality of what it meant to walk with Jesus. I'm reading this over and over again. There are familiar passages in it, troubling passages. I'm trying not to say all the things that I want to say right now because I want to be really sensitive to what God is actually, what we're doing today. That's part of my struggle. But here's the way the Sermon on the Mount gets to the end. And Jesus utters these words and he says, so, like it's like, in light of this, like the final, like he's landing the plane. He's about to tell an illustration of two houses, one built on sand, the other built on rock. And he gets to the very end of it, right before he gets that, he says, so, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You know what that's called, right? You teach this to our kindergartners, the golden rule. And then he says this, we're gonna put this on the screen. Matthew chapter 7, verse 13. Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to what? And those who enter it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is what? Hard that leads to life. And those who find it are few. Beware of those who sling baloney for a living, who come to you as wolves in sheep's clothing. They are wolves. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but they're inward, they're ravenous wolves. You'll be able to tell them by what? By what comes out of them, by their fruit. This is Jesus. And what he says here is really important for us to stop and to pause because he talks about this narrow way. And he says this narrow way, or this gate is both narrow and this gate is also what? It's what? It's hard. It's hard. But this hard way leads us to life. So the question is, when? When does that hard way lead you to life? How you answer that question is how you think about the gospel. You know what most of us think? I want to presume on you. But if I endure in this life and believe the right things, it leads to what? Life when? When I die. Part of what I've been trying to do personally within our church is to stop making the gospel about our eternal destination and start making it about the reality that we have been born again. And therein we have to start answering the question, what are we born again into? The way is hard that leads to eternal life that is available to us right now. That is the message of Jesus. That is the way this is laid out in the scriptures. And we're going to look at this in the life of Paul. But I'm trying to help us to do this because so many of us revert back so quickly. We revert back so quickly into this sort of idea of eternal assurance, and we miss the life that we are intended to live. So the hard way has looked like if you just suck it up long enough and you take this enough, then somehow you will find heaven when you die. And that is not what he's talking about. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. For the gate is wide that leads to destruction, but narrow is the road that leads to life. There's a way for us to walk and to live and to draw source from that is different. You have been born, if you have been born again, that's the language. That means you derive life from a different source. And that's what I'm trying to connect to. What kind of source are you actually designed to live from? What kind of life are you designed to live? We talked this last week, right, with Dallas Willard and the cabbages and the water buffaloes. There's a way in which you and I, as human beings, have been suited and designed to live. And so I want to look at this in Paul's letter. We're going to read some passages before it. I'm going to give you a list that will include everybody. And then we're going to try to see if we can find something different. And what I want to be really mindful of is some of you are here and you disproportionately scale yourselves as being bad or not good at faith or whatever it might be. I want you just to hold on and not make any judgments about yourselves until we get to the end, right? If you start to feel shame or guilt or whatever, that is not of God. And we're going to try to walk through that to find what it is that God has actually said about us and what he's actually made available to us. Can we do that? Okay. So this is Galatians chapter 5, starting in verse 16. These are some of I lived in these passages as a high school, college, early in my faith walk. Now, Paul's already talked about it is for freedom that you've been set free. Christ has set us free. Do not, again, be a yoke or be in bondage to that system. That's his kind of warrant. He says the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself in love. Remember we talked this a couple weeks ago. It's interesting. Paul would echo what Jesus said. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself in love. And if we're unclear about what love is, he's like, it sums up the whole command. If you love your neighbor, right, that's the whole law. And so then he says this in Galatians chapter 5. So I say, walk in the Spirit, and you will not gratify these desires that are undermining. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want to do. Do you feel the tension? I know it's a shock, but you know that you can want wrong things? I remember just coming to realize that. I was like, dude, I can want things that are really terrible for me and a lot of other people. So what do? We have to learn how to derive something from somewhere else. But, and we're going to come back to this, if you are led by the Spirit, now if I'm writing this, if you're led by the Spirit, right, you're going to be free. And what does he say? If you're led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. Where did that come from? Where does this come from? This is what happens in my head while I'm doing my quiet time. I just ask a gajillion questions. And the good thing about God's faithfulness is some questions I have asked for 15 years, and he is beginning to he doesn't answer them. You begin to see things. You walk by faith and not by sight. You begin to see things. Things begin to open up. And you go, oh, that's what that was. So I'm going to try to clear out some of this whatever's in front of us and sort it out. So then he gets to the good. So this is where you're at, right? One thing is opposed to the other thing. So we've got to have something to sort or govern our desires. And then he says this: the acts of the flesh are obvious. Are y'all ready for a list? I've actually put it on your outline so you can have the whole list there to put on your dashboard and just guilt yourself into oblivion all week. Just wanted you to have it in front of you. So I'm going to read this, okay? Are you ready? The acts of the flesh, they're obvious, he says. Sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft. Now, here's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to go, nope, that's not me. Drink a little, but not debaucherous. Nope, that's not me either. Are you trying to get out from underneath this? Just me? Okay. Witchcraft? No, of course not. This is where the Harry Potter panic came from. Hatred, discord, jealousy, driving on College Road, walking into a messy house, not getting your, table that you signed up, like whatever it might be that causes you to lose your mind, that's there. Now how are you doing? You're like, I can't get up from underneath this anymore. Selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and everything else is like this. I love this. Anything else you can think of. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not what? Inherit the kingdom of God. And again, I ask you, when? Do you see what we do? Almost automatically. People who do these things don't get to go to heaven when they die. It's like, I think Paul will be going, no. You're missing the point. I don't think you understood what Jesus was talking about. If you think about this, and I'm going to go through this list, and I left a couple of Greek words on your outlines just so you can see, that's because you'll try to get out front. Sexual immorality is the Greek word porneia, which is where we get the word pornography. It's just a general description for sexual, it's a giant word. Anything other than is like the sexual ethic that is ascribed to us for marriage. Impurity, it's a kind of a uncleanliness. Debauchery is also translated in some of your versions, sensuality. This is like a licentiousness. It's like there's just no restraint. There's nothing, you just kind of, you just kind of whatever is happening. Witchcraft or idolatry is really what it is. Witchcraft is also translated sorcery. It's the Greek word pharmakeia, which is where we get our word pharmacy. I did a deep dive on this. Because a lot of us think, well, that isn't us, but this is really thought of as a disregard for God's order. It was used to take and craft things that would manipulate things that were intended for good and manipulate them into other things. It was to use witchcraft and sorcery and sort of magic. In our culture, I think you could think about, we're left this because we have to bring this to bear on ours. I mean, how many of you guys encounter sorcerers regularly during the week? Probably not many. So we just go, this ain't for me. Well, no, this is about self-medication. It's about twisting. How many of us do that? I mean, it's the rise of attentiveness to how we are using things that have been given to us, entrusted to us. Zealous or jealousy there. Discord is contentiousness. Hatred or enmity is like this deep-seated ill will. It's like contempt for other people. Contempt for people who aren't like you. Golly, the thing that I see is the contemptuousness and the self-righteousness that cause us to think things about other people. That's exactly what he's talking about. Self-ambition. This is just personal advancement without concern for other people. I'm just going to step on whoever I need to step on to get ahead. Have we left anybody out so far? Factions or divisions is rallying support in order to undermine. You ever gone to someone and asked what they think about a particular issue and they don't tell you what you want to hear, you go find someone else? That's what this is. Envy is translated really like spite or resentment. So these, you could just deep dive these words and it just sort of encompasses this way of life. And the last one is orgies. Again, we're we don't do that. But it's like carousing and revelry. It's again this sort of giving ourselves in ways that undermine what it is to be human. The reason you track these, whether it's sexuality in the sort of slope, the cliff you go off there, the reason is because these are things that undermine humanity. We view sexuality much more like the animal world than any version of the dignity of humanity. And that's the whole metaphor from Revelation is the beast, the animal-like beastly behavior, and then this beauty of humanity. So anytime we give ourselves to these kinds of animal, like that's the dichotomy that's being drawn throughout the scriptures. So then you say, well, how do you stop this? How do you stop this? Well, you know how to stop it. You make a rule, and then you threaten to punish yourself or others if they break it, right? Some of you do this to yourself. You're like, if I do this again, I'm gonna do like 500 push-ups. Or you try to find nobody else does this. Like you realize that in our culture, these things give way to self-harm. Do you know why? Because it is a way for us to try and find a sense of rightness in a world we can't find it. And so something needs to be broken or harmed, punished. So this is how we deal with it. You make a rule, you make a promise, you make a law, and if you violate it, right, it's going to be bad. I go back to verse 18. If you are led by the Spirit, you do not live under that anymore. How freeing is that? How freeing is that? When I stopped trying to manage sin in my life and I began to learn how to depend on a different source, it did not make it easier. Hard is the way that leads to life. But it is there. There are huckleberries everywhere. They are all over the place. This is what the good news is all about. How then, this is the question. If we walk by the Spirit, we are no longer under the law. Here's the answer to the question. So you say, when will I be free from these things? The answer to that question is as you walk with Him. What we want is for this to be done, where we don't have to worry about it anymore. And what God is inviting us to is to learn how to live and to derive source and life from Him so that we can experience this freedom without having to hold our breath and fight with every kind of act. He goes on. In Galatians chapter 5, continue on 22, right? He says, I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not experience the kingdom of God. Like, you're not going to experience this kind of life. That's what he's saying. This has very little to do with going to heaven when you die. You're not going to, if you live like this, you're not going to experience these things. Here's what's even more interesting. The very beginning of this passage, it says, the acts of the flesh. And we just think it's like, these are the choices that I make. It's really not like that. It's basically this, and what I was trying to think about this, is if we consider this differently, because most of us, we make this list and we go, here's the list of bad things, and we read the gifts of the Spirit, or the fruit of the Spirit, we list, these are the good things. So these are the things we shouldn't do, and these are the things we should try to do. And that's how most of us have approached our walks, our attempts at being a good Christian. And I want us to consider something a little bit differently. Instead of thinking this is a list of good things and bad things, I want you to think of this as realities. Realities. Look at the list on your outlines. Sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, and orgies, and all the other things. Those are realities that happen to humans when they abdicate the source of life. You and I should expect no different. Does that make sense? We think these are bad things that we do. This is the normal trajectory of life apart from God. This is what humans do when they are pulled away or separated from the source. Do you see that? This is why Paul says, so I say, walk in the Spirit, and you're not going to give in to these things. Walk in the Spirit, you're going to find a different way to live. So we're like, how do we do this? Let me just, this is what I love about, and Paul is a brilliant writer, because this next line, the Acts, this function of life of under this rule is all of these things, and if you do those things, you're never gonna experience the life you were intended for. But the fruit of the Spirit is what? Love. And I would put me personally, I would put an exclamation point there. This word is singular. Beware of false prophets. They're like in sheep's clothing, but inside they're ravenous wolves. And you'll know them by their fruit. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself in love. And the fruit of the Spirit is love. You ever read 1 Corinthians 13? You've probably heard it at a wedding. We've made this like this beautiful like calligraphy poetry. But it's like if I have the greatest faith in the world, but I have not love, I am nothing. If I give my body to be burned, but I have not faith, but I have not love, I'm nothing. If I have prophecies and faith and other things, but I don't have love, it doesn't matter. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not jealous. Love does not act unbecomingly. Love bears all things. You've heard this before. So this is exactly what Paul is doing. He says the fruit of the Spirit is love. It is joy, peace, and patience, and kindness, and gentleness, and goodness. Did I leave one out? Faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These all come out of what it is to learn how to love. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself in these ways. It's for you and I to learn how to say, what is happening in this moment? What do I need? How do I derive source so that I don't give in to just what I want, but I find something else, something other, something right, something redemptive. Hard is this way of life because everything else is easy and obvious. So, last thing. Is that up there? Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions. Since we live by the Spirit, since we derive life this way, we got to stay there. And let us not become conceited, provoking, and envying each other. Back to John. He writes, this is in chapter 5 of his little letter at the end. For everyone who has been born of God, so here's that language again, right? Whoever is born of God, whoever loves his brother or sister is born of God, right? But whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. Whoever is born of God overcomes the world. Now, what does that mean? He just talks about this earlier on in his book, and he says, do not love the world or anything in the world. For the world, and he uses these three descriptors: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life. It sounds a lot like you could just take that list that we just read and just kind of jam it into those three categories. And he's just saying, this is life, this is likely life in the broken world. You're gonna fall into these patterns unless something else intervenes and sources a different way. And so what he's saying here is that everyone who is born of God overcomes this lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, boastful pride of life. And this is the victory that overcomes the world. What is it? Our faith. Really? Who is it that overcomes the world except the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God? Here's how we think about it. If I have faith, I have overcome the world. And therefore, I don't have to worry about it anymore. This should be easy pickings from this. Have you ever felt like that? If I can just get this right today, I'll be good from here on out. The way of the narrow road is hard. Aren't you glad you came today? Faith is the victory that overcomes. Your faith, my faith, our capacity to take a sip of source in the depths overcomes the world. Your capacity to be faithful overcomes the world. It overcomes every desire and every drive that undermines who it is that you've been created to be. To take a little sip, so you don't have to rush back or take a little sip of source for that moment. It overcomes the world. And here's the better question. When does it overcome the world? In the moment that you're in. And that's enough. This list of things that's on your list aren't things that you're supposed to beat. You might beat some of them. A lot of them will be with you until you take your last breath of oxygen on this earth. But what you need to understand is that in every moment that you struggle with them, there's another source that says you don't have to live like this or be like this. There's a faith that overcomes, that overcomes anything that undermines God's purposes and his call for your life and for mine. And it overcomes it in the moment. And the next moment, guess what you're going to need? More faith to overcome whatever it is that's going to be coming in that moment, and so on and so on and so on. But this way leads you to the eternal kind of life, to experience the eternal kind of life for which you are best suited for. That sounds like good news, doesn't it? It's because it is. It's the gospel. It is good news. This is what Jesus has done for us. Father, would you help us to experience a kind of faith that overcomes the world? Even this morning, I know there are folks who are here and they feel just a little bit of freedom. And the temptation is that, this freedom will just be there. And that's not how this works. The freedom that we feel in this moment is because we trust in this moment. And the beautiful thing is that we can trust you again in the next, again in the next, again in the next, again in the next, and again in the next, and find you to be faithful. And that our faithfulness wouldn't result from our effort, but would just be a fruit. A fruit. It would be an expression of your image in our lives. So God, help us. We lift all these things to you. In the name of your son, Jesus, who reigns over all.